The greatest lies always have a hint of truth to them. All right, so I got my camera set up for this one, my desktop camera, as you can see, and I want to sort of settle this whole thing. Maybe not settle, but maybe settle my opinion and my what I believe is going on with this whole thing. I got a comment from one of my Facebook friends on that my post the other day about this Algerian female fighter, quote unquote, and that basically asked me where do I have my evidence for this what is essentially a genetic disorder of that this individual has, which essentially is that they're a male biologically and yet have, I like to call it, female tendencies, for just for keeping the language, you might say, at a decent level. Where's the evidence? Because all he's seen is speculation. Well, I will admit, I have to admit that a lot of what we have right now is speculation. We don't have anything certain, and I think one of the reasons is because I'm just going to say it. I think the Algerian government is being a little bit suspect. The kids today call it sus. I think it's kind of I don't like that term. I guess I'm a modern day boomer in that regard. But the reason why I think that is because what we're looking at, like on the face, it's sort of like looking at the 9/11 conspiracies and stuff, or the JFK assassination. We don't have access to all the information that we probably should have access to in order to make good judgments. But what we have is what we're seeing that warrants questions. It warrants serious questions, but the government is not giving us access to that for various reasons. And you might sit there and say, well, what would the Algerian government have for, what reason would they have for concealing a lot of this information? Wanting to win gold medals at the Olympics? Again, so now you might say, Chase, are you saying that this individual is really transgender? Here's what I think. The greatest lies always have a hint of truth to them. And in this situation, what warrants that kind of a statement? Well, you see a lot of conservative media, and I think mistakenly say that this Khalif character, this Algerian, is a transgender. Now, I personally think that the term transgender is a term that is made for something that doesn't exist. Transgenderism is really just self-mutilation. It is self-mutilation to accommodate gender dysphoria. That's what I think transgenderism is. In reality, it's a meaningless term, I think, because it is attributed to something which is a disorder of the mind, not a physical disorder. It's a mental disorder. So anyways, I would say it is incorrect for our conservative media to basically say that this individual is transgender. And when you say something like that, you are just giving the Looney Tunes on the left just more ammunition to basically call out your own credibility. So I'm not going to call this individual transgender. Now, but what is going on? Well, like I said, the best lies always have a hint or enough truth to them. So while this individual is not transgender, and it is because this individual I don't believe is transgender, that allows the Algerian media or the Algerian government to basically say, see, it's a woman. It really is a woman. Because this individual apparently, not that I've ever seen and not that I want to see, I wouldn't ask this individual to reveal this information. But what they can claim that this individual definitely has female parts. That's a legitimate point, and that means that this individual is not transgender. That allows them to say that this is really a female, when in reality what I think is what we're dealing with, and I think the Algerian government doesn't want to admit to, is an individual who has a particular disorder. I don't remember the name of the disorder, but a particular disorder that you may call it intersex. I don't know if that's the right term. I've heard people question that term too as useful in this situation, but this individual is born with XY chromosomes, and I got a few articles that will, I think, support this claim, because again, I'm being asked, I don't want to say accused, but I'm being asked to show where we have proof that this person has XY chromosomes. I want to read a few articles here that I found on X this morning that I think are really helpful. And again, do these prove anything without a shadow of a doubt? Absolutely not. But what they do offer is the same thing when it comes to conspiracies and like the things I just mentioned before, the COVID stuff. Here's another example. Let's get into biblical examples here. In Scripture and in the study of the manuscript tradition of Scripture, we have clear evidences of textual variations. Those are very obvious. Let's look at the woman caught in adultery. I know I'm going to trigger a lot of people when I pick on this one, but in the issue of the woman caught in adultery in John chapter 8, where ends up being. That is a major textual variant. It's a major textual variant because that section, that scene of the woman caught in adultery is found in numerous other manuscripts to be in the Gospel of Luke, not in the Gospel of John. It also doesn't appear in some of the earliest manuscripts. It mostly appears in later manuscripts. But even, if I recall correctly, even within the variation itself, there are differences. And you can say similar things about the longer ending of Mark. And as a result of that, there is serious question as to the authenticity of this scene, that John really wrote this, that this really was part of John's Gospel. That the point being, there's enough evidence to question the truthfulness of this thing. So the way I see it, I apply that kind of same principle to pretty much everything. If I see enough evidence, there's obscurity. You look at the claims of Joseph Smith, it's 4 accounts of the first vision, and then the mixed accounts that contradict each other from those who recount the very first vision. Forgot some of their names. In that instance, there is enough evidence to warrant suspicion that should warrant more investigation, justifiably so. I think we have the same thing going on here. There's enough evidence here that should make us go, something's not right here. Something doesn't add up. Truth should be just pretty straightforward. It should be able to just, really easily, because it's the truth. There's something else going on here. And I think when we look at the evidence that we have, just like with COVID, just like with everything else, we should be able to at least go, something's up. So what is my evidence for this? Well, let me read this article here. I found this on redux.info. And this article I think is written before Khalif fights that Italian woman. It's posted on July 27th, 2024. That was before the fight, because I remember I was still in Utah at that time, and the fight definitely did not happen in Utah while I was in Utah. This is by Ann Slates. All right, so I'm going to start reading. 2 athletes competing at the Paris Olympics as women were previously disqualified from a women's world championship for having, quote, XY chromosomes. Imaine Khalif of Algeria and Lin Yu Ting of Taiwan are scheduled to compete in Olympic women's boxing next week, despite past questions surrounding their biological sex. The Women's World Boxing Championship took place in March of 2023 and was hosted in New Delhi, India. A total of 324 boxers from 64 nations competed during the 10-day trial, marking the largest participation in any iteration of the championship ever recorded. However, the grand event was marred by controversy after Umar Kremlev, president of International Boxing Association, announced the disqualification of multiple boxers from the championship. Kremlev said that IBA executives had met towards the championship's grand finale to discuss, quote, fairness among athletes and professionalism, end quote, after concerns were raised about the biological sex of some participants. He added that after, quote, a series of DNA tests, end quote, the IBA, quote, uncovered athletes who were trying to fool their colleagues and pretend to be women, end quote. Speaking to TASS, T-A-S-S News, Kremlev claimed that the tests had proven the athletes in question, quote, had XY chromosomes and were thus excluded from the sports events, end quote. Among the disqualified was Imaine Khalif, an Algerian boxer who had been set to challenge Yang Liu of China in the welterweight final. Khalif was removed from the gold medal fight, and Thailand's Yanjem who had lost to Khalif in the semifinals, was allowed to proceed to fight Yang instead. In a public statement, the IBF wrote that, quote, a boxer from Algeria, Imaine Khalif, was excluded from the IBA World Boxing Championships due to the failure to meet the IBA eligibility criteria, end quote. But the Algerian Olympic Committee denied the IBA's claims, attributing Khalif's disqualification to a, quote, conspiracy to prevent Algeria from having a gold medal in boxing. All right, so I want to pause right there. That right there to me is suspect. That kind of a response, it's very suspect to me. Why is that suspect? Because I've seen that kind of rhetoric before from people who were very clearly guilty of something wrong. They just basically victimize themselves. Oh, it's a conspiracy against me. They just don't want me to win. They just, whatever, blah, 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 blah. That kind of reaction is very, let me just say this very clear. Again, I don't have proof of any of this. I don't have direct proof. What I'm just saying is based on what I'm seeing, the ancillary, you might say, evidence I have, there is something weird going on here. There's something that's not right. And I think it is very reasonable to ask some serious questions here. You may disagree with me in the end, but don't you think it is reasonable for me to have some serious questions? You might go, at the end of the day, I don't share Chase's opinions, but he does. I can see his point. I understand his position. And for me, like, that's all I'm asking. Because to me, it's like, why instead of just saying it's a conspiracy, why not provide the proof? Why not go, look, here's all the proof here, look at this. Here's all the data. Here's all the information you have. Everything we have on this person. Here it is. Instead, you just basically say, well, it was a conspiracy. If you have proof that somebody is conspiring against one of your fighters, again, if you have truth on your side, you shouldn't have to hide anything. You shouldn't have to respond in ways like this to try and push what I see as a narrative to make yourself out as a victim of politics. Again, you can say it like, okay, there was a conspiracy against us. So what I don't understand is, like, why not then do it to the other countries and stuff? Like, why wasn't the IBA, Women's World Boxing Championship, or the IBA, you might say, why are they only targeting Algeria? Why not other countries? Why not other participants, stuff like that? That seems to me to not make sense. So if you have proof that this is a conspiracy, that this is being bent against you, your country, and your own fighters, well, then show the proof. Show it. Prove it. Prove that your fighter does not have what I think a lot of us in this article seems to be insinuating is somebody who has a gender disorder to where they're actually a man with enough female tendencies to allow you to get away with a lie. Like I said, the best lies have a small modicum of truth to them. All right, so continuing on. While they vaguely alluded to Khalif being struck for, quote, medical reasons, end quote, surrounding high testosterone levels, they added that they would be supporting Khalif's journey to the 2024 Paris Olympics regardless. All right, but following the controversial disqualification, a female boxer came forward to discuss her experience fighting Khalif in the ring at the championship. Quote, this is what she said: "When I fought with her, I felt very out of my depth," Mexican boxer Brianda Tamara wrote on X. "Her blows hurt me a lot. I don't think I have ever felt that in my 13 years as a boxer, nor my sparring with men," which is, I mean, yeah, that's understandable. Sparring, you're really not putting a lot of. You're usually not. Some sparring goes really hard, but sparring, you're really not putting a lot of force to it, even when you're fighting against guys. And mostly because those guys understand their guys, and they're going to obviously go a little bit easier on you. Thank God that day I got out of the ring safely, and it's good that they finally realized that. That's all she said. Tamara said. A second boxer was similarly disqualified by the IBA at the event, Taiwan's Lin Yu-ting, who was also stripped of a bronze medal. Lin had previously won 5 gold medals in women's boxing tournaments. Yeah, that's totally a woman, sure. I'm seeing a picture of this Lin. Like, look at, I mean, no. Despite having faced the disqualification just last year, both boxers will be competing in Paris as female boxers. Khalif is scheduled to fight Italy's Angela Carini on August 1st, so it was a fight on August 1st, while Lin Yu-ting is set to be matched the next day. While neither have stated that they identified as transgender, it is suspected that both are impacted by a difference of sexual development, DSD, a category of medical conditions encompassing any problem noted at birth where the genitalia are atypical in relation to the chromosomes or gonads. DSDs in elite sports first came to public attention during the meteoric rise of South African runner Caster Semenya. Semenya's rapid improvements in performance beginning in 2009 initially triggered suspicions of drug use, and World Athletics, then called the IAAF, was internationally announced for requesting Semenya take a test to ascertain his biological sex. Most women, including elite female athletes, have natural testosterone levels of 0.12 to 1.79 nanomoles per liter. But Semenya has XY chromosomes and male gonads producing a normal level of testosterone for a male. In 2011, Semenya was measured as having 15.6 and 29.3 liters. Years later, a decision in the Court of Arbitration for Sport revealed that Semenya has a DSD where the normal male sexual development fails in utero, resulting in external genitals that appear to be a vagina at birth, but was in fact an underdeveloped penis. All right, so I just gave away the farm, I guess. So, but that's what the article is saying. What we have here is again suspicion. Friend on Facebook who's asking me for proof of this said all he has is speculation. Speculation, perhaps, but I would call it suspicion. I think there's enough here to warrant suspicion. Again, like I was just talking about with manuscript issues, textual variations, with COVID, conspiracy stuff, there is enough ambiguity and there's enough things that aren't adding up, you might say, to warrant suspicion. So this is one of them. Could these individuals, could Khalif be suffering this particular kind of disorder where they're essentially a man, but things got a little mixed up in the development process where he's actually developing female parts but is essentially a man. That's what I think is what is going on here. That's exactly what I believe is what's happening here. I'm being told basically that, look, we don't have any proof that this is such, and I'm like, yeah, exactly. And I think that's a problem, right? Don't you think that's a problem that the Algerian government themselves is not actually giving up the information about this individual? Maybe they don't even know themselves. I don't know. I don't know. I don't think about Algeria, every day and what their government's like and what kind of society they have. Is it a first world? Is it a third? What kind of technology they have that would allow them to, or research, to be able to understand these things? I don't know. But the point is, we don't have the official information. So we are left to speculate. And I think there's enough to suspect. This is a legitimate possibility here that is what we're dealing with. Speaking to Redux, a representative with the Independent Council on Women's Sports, ICONS, condemned the confusion that had emerged surrounding the sex of competitors due to the International Olympics Committee's 2000 decision to end sex verification screening. The IOC's decision to end sex verification screening in 2000 has caused distrust and confusion in women's sports events since, ICON's co-founder Marshy Smith said. Its 2021 decision to offload the responsibility for international eligibility criteria to individual sporting bodies has resulted in varied standards and widespread chaos among athletes, coaches, officials, and the public. Smith notes that a new boxing qualification system was implemented for the 2024 Olympics, in which an ad hoc unit was created by the International Olympics Committee, IOC, Executive Board to reorganize the boxing competitions for Paris 2024. This new unit was set up after the International Boxing Association, IBA, which had previously disqualified Khalif and Lin from women's championships, was suspended by IOC due to concerns it was receiving funding from Russia. So there you go. They're being funded by that Russia, who is unjustly invading Ukraine, which is currently being massively funded by the U.S. government, and rumors now of joining NATO, which, we promised Russia we would never do. That Russia, But it's only because of Russia. Like, that to me is already suspect. Like, again, I'm very suspicious about that. In the FAQ for the Paris 2024 boxing unit, no gender eligibility guidelines are specified. Something Smith suggests likely indicates that individual nations were given a tremendous amount of power to deem their own athletes eligible. Well, there you go. So basically that says to me Algeria gets to screen their own athletes and provide whatever data they're going to provide to what are they going to do? They're going to show the person, they're going to provide eligibility papers, but like, who's preventing them from hiding the truth about this individual's medical condition? And what's funny to me is, I'll just say this now, I was going to say this towards the end, because I've been seeing a bunch of posts from lefty liberal Looney Tunes saying the Algeria, and not even them, like a lot of libertarians are doing this too. The Algerian government, they're against transgenderism. They would never allow a transgender to fight for them or whatever in the Olympics. Well, again, going back to what I was saying first, saying first, this isn't really a transgender individual. If we're going to be honest, I don't think we're dealing with transgender individuals. So that allows people to smokescreen and attack a straw man. The second thing is, why are we sitting around here pretending as if these Islamic countries are just honest, kind, and innocent, and wouldn't hurt a fly kind of countries that have no political agenda? Islam is a political agenda. The idea that these countries would never, ever lie in order to get some kind of political advantage. And look, there's a lot of politics in the Olympics. Your country winning gold medals in the Olympics shows, it demonstrates your political or your national power, strength. So you could say there's a lot of nationalism involved. Why wouldn't Algeria want to win gold medals to show its national strength in the international political world? And so therefore, why wouldn't they go to certain means to make sure they get that? Again, there's enough evidence here to warrant suspicion that they're not exactly being forthcoming about their unique fighter. All right, so in boxing, so we're reading a quote here. In boxing, the recent contentious split between the IBA and the IOC has now placed Olympic eligibility power into the hands of national boxing federations, allowing countries like Algeria and Taiwan to set their own standards and continue placing male boxers in the ring with female athletes in combat for women's Olympic medals, end quote, Smith explains. Quote, the physical abuse of women on an Olympic stage eliminates the integrity of all Olympic events and risks lifelong injury or even death for female athletes. This deceit cannot be allowed, end quote. Now, can we argue that's conjecture on this person's part? I think you can. Okay, that's fine. I will admit that. But again, I'm just going to say here, based on a lot of things I've been reading, there is evidence that warrants this kind of stuff. There absolutely is. But here's another tweet I found. Someone responding to someone say, so someone asks, can any of you qualified with relevant expertise explain in layman's terms the Olympic boxers DSD and what it means? Thank you. So someone responded here, someone named Emma Hilton. She said, if it is as suspected, I think that's a good thing to say. I think there's good reason to suspect. As suspected, 5-ARD. This means the baby starts developing as a healthy male, XY, testes, testosterone, and all the internal plumbing, but the baby lacks a protein needed to make a penis grow. This means that baby's external genitals can develop as female looking. Hence, the baby might be registered at birth as a female. During puberty, the male internal bits start kicking out huge amounts of testosterone as per male, and their external genitals start to become more masculine. It's a kind of catch-up. Not only that, but testosterone at puberty, produced by all that internal male biology, does all the regular stuff it does to muscles, blah blah. So their body, the thing that they run, jump, and punch with, has developed like any other male. That's why they shouldn't be in female categories. It's got precisely nothing to do with their external genitalia and what their paperwork says. See, that's the issue. What is the paperwork saying? As far as I can tell, we have no access to that. And I think we deserve it. I have seen pictures of this guy. I'm looking at a picture of this guy right now. Look at this guy. It's a dude. I'm looking at a picture of this Khalif individual. There is nothing female anywhere at all on that person's body. Nothing. They're like looking at them right here in this picture. It's a picture of him running in a jogging. Those are man shoulders. Those are manly arms. That's a manly waist, a manly chest. There is nothing. There are no prominent breasts there whatsoever. Facial structure is very male. Now, there's a woman in the U.S. Olympics, women's Olympics rugby team. I forgot her name, but she's been accused of being transgender. And I feel really bad for her because she's not. That is a woman. She's very stout, obviously. But see, there are just things you can see. I'm guilty of watching women's MMA. The older I get, the less of a fan I am of it. Just women's boxing and just women's combat sports in general. Then why are you talking about this, Chase? Well, I'm just talking about being fair. If we're going to have it, we need to be fair. Do I favor women's combat sports? Not really. But if you're going to have women's combat sports, it needs to be fair. You can't be having men beating up women. So anyways, you can always tell, even with these muscular built women in women's MMA, that they're still women. They have smaller shoulders, usually smaller arms. Amanda Nunes was a little bit different. She had pretty broad shoulders and pretty lengthy arms, which made her extremely dangerous in the women's division. But there are still features on Amanda Nunes that you could tell that's a woman. Her waist is that's a woman's waist. She has the chest. Everything that else is there on all of these women. You can see it, including on that rugby player. You can tell that's a woman's body. It's a very bulked up woman's body, but that is a woman. This right here, I don't see any of that. None whatsoever. Again, I've been watching women's MMA for a while, and you can just tell. And I'm looking at this, and I'm like, yeah, there's nothing female about that at all, that person. Nothing whatsoever. So, again, here's another picture of it. I mean, that is a dude. That is absolutely a man, not a woman at all. You can look at the picture. It's a picture of this Khalif jogging, wearing a kind of like a pinkish shirt. Emirates fly better. That's what the shirt says. Got a red hat on, something the ring, what the hat says. You can look at that picture and tell me that that is a woman. That is not a woman. That fits the description, again, because we do not have the actual documentation, because the Algerian government doesn't provide it. They instead just accuse us of being involved in conspiracy theories, conspiracies against the Algerian government, but apparently not against all the other countries, just Algeria. Yeah, so let me read here what Ali Beth Stuckey has written. Based on all the information we have, this seems to be the truth about Emayne Khalif, or Khalif, whatever. Khalif has XY chromosomes and appears to have been marked as, quote, female at birth because of a disorder of sex development that causes malformation, lack of formation of genitalia. It is not factual to say Khalif is a woman. It is also not true, as far as we know, to say Khalif is trans. Very true. The presence of XY chromosomes, however, does mean that Khalif is male and has testosterone levels far above female levels. This gives a distinct unfair advantage, which is why the International Boxing Association ruled Khalif ineligible to compete against women. I'm seeing commentary from some Christians saying that because Khalif isn't trans, we should in grace exclude Khalif from this gender debate. I disagree. This is Ali's words. Khalif was likely sought after because of the condition that allows one to pass as female while still having male advantages. Khalif did not have to choose a sport in which he would be pummeling smaller, weaker women for money. That was a deliberate decision, and it's an evil one. We can have sympathy for the decision without blurring the lines of right and wrong. So I think a lot of what Ali is saying is true. I just would not touch the transgender issue on this whole thing, because you're just allowing the Looney Tunes on the left to basically pick on that, and because this isn't a transgender individual, it's not. And so the moment you say, well, I think this does have something to do with the transgender debate, they're going to immediately jump on that and just try to ignore everything else, all the other facts, the irrelevant facts you're talking about here. So that's the one thing I would just disagree with here with Ali. But I do agree. What I think has happened is Khalif, because he has this disorder which allows the Algerian government to get away on technicalities, which really are silly at the end of the day. They can pass this as a female boxer, even though all the external evidence points to the contrary. All the evidence that we have, anyway, I think. Okay, so let me just respond to something a friend of mine on Facebook posted, because he was arguing as well but he was arguing that this is actually a woman, and he kept telling me they have female genitalia. Here's this. Everything I've been reading to you here is my response to that. They have female genitalia because of this disorder, but ultimately, at the end of the day, XY chromosomes. That's a man. So, but then he also said, she was treated as a girl. When you look at the pictures of her as a girl, she was definitely a girl, a little girl. And I was like, no, that's not going to work, because all kids, as before puberty, I mean, they all have. Look, if you look at my nephew right now, he's 3.5 years old. He's never had a haircut in his life, so he has some long hair. He's been mistaken for a girl numerous times. I wish my brother would get him a haircut, but my brother said he wants to let him choose when he wants to get a haircut. But I don't blame people for mistaking my nephew for a girl, because he's a kid. He's a little 3.5-year-old kid. He's definitely nowhere near going through puberty yet. He's just got a little kid's body and face. That's what little kids have. All little kids have that, boy or girl. They just have that, and I described it, they have that soft appearance where they're just innocent little kids. It's when they go through puberty that you really start to see the difference. The girls have their development process, the boys have their development process. The boys usually get taller. They suddenly just growth spurt. Shoulders start to get broad, limbs get longer. They just become so much more developed. That's when you start really telling the difference between a boy and a girl. So it doesn't surprise me that you see pictures of this individual as a kid dressed as a girl and looks like a girl. That's not hard to pull off. But once you start getting into that age where puberty starts to kick in, then you start to see the difference. Then you really start to see if that's a boy or a girl. And based on everything I've seen, what I'm literally looking at here in the picture, the DSD situation makes a lot of sense. It makes perfect sense. And the Algerian government doesn't want to provide the information that would prove that, because now they're one of their probably their best bet of getting a gold medal would be disqualified. Tell me how that doesn't make any sense. How does that not make sense? That makes perfect sense. It's the same thing with that shooter, the Trump shooter, and Steve Deace has been calling this out for the last couple of weeks, you know. And Steve Deace's big question is this, basically, because again, it's the same situation. They're not providing the obvious data that would help us prove this. So we look at everything that we see, that we have, and we go, something is not right here. Something is completely off. This should never have happened. There is something wrong here. And Steve Deace basically says, you know, based on everything we have, everything we know, and that's the thing here. Based on everything you know, what would the government have done differently that would show that this was not a setup? Something like that. And basically, the implication is nothing. And what does that imply? That the U.S. government set this up deliberately so someone would assassinate Trump. It fits perfectly. It just fits. It makes perfect sense. That's the same thing we got going on here. At the end of the day, if you're asking me, what's your proof, Chase? What do you have? This is what I would say. I would say, I don't have definitive proof, but what I have is reasonable suspicion. Very good reasonable suspicion that this is what the actual reality is. And the whole idea that this Algerian government, that this Islamic nation, they would never allow such an individual. Do we need to seriously go into the history of Islam and its deception to try and gain its hypocrisy, to try and gain advantages in the world? I mean, come on. These people are the epitome of hypocrisy. They sit there and they act all pious that we are a righteous people going after the will of God. And a lot of them even admit, I believe, I could probably relay this to some of my friends who do apologetics to Islam, because they know more than me about the Quran and stuff, obviously, that the Quran favors lying. If it helps the cause of Islam, you can lie. Because Islam, like I was saying, Islam is inherently a political ideology. It's a political religion. The whole goal of Islam is to politically change the world. And I put politically there to just differentiate between people like myself who are at least sympathetic towards theonomy, because that's not the way theonomy works. It doesn't work by politics. It works by truly changing the hearts of people. Islam is more, it's political. It's forcing by way of law and regulation people into the Islamic culture and stuff. So this whole idea that the Islamic nation would never lie or never deceive people so they could gain an advantage in the games is ridiculous. I don't believe it for a moment, okay? So, as I was saying, the greatest lies have a small bit of truth to them. And what do we have that here? The DSD that we were talking about, this disorder, causes female genitalia growth of some kind, albeit deformed and, not seriously, maturely female. And it is those little tiny facts, those little tiny truths that become the most dangerous kinds of lies that allow people to get away with things. Those are the most dangerous ones, and those are the ones that we have to watch out for the most. So those are my thoughts. There you go. There's the evidence. I will post a link to this article here for anyone to read, the sources I got, for all of this. So hope this is helpful and useful to anybody. And look, I'll just say this one thing. This is probably all I'm going to say on this matter. You decide for yourself. I just want to rather move on to other things right now. So there you go. Soli Deo Gloria. God bless. Bye.